What will cause the next pandemic? On March 11th, 2020, the World Health Organization officially declared the vast spread of COVID-19 a pandemic, sending the world into an unseen era of lockdowns, virtual work and schooling, and overall depression. Eventually, we emerged from that, but the world was permanently changed and millions of lives were lost. But now we need to talk about a new threat, bird flu, more specifically H5N1. H5N1 is a strand of bird flu that has been spreading rapidly through poultry farms, dairy cattle, wild birds, and many other animal populations. As of now, the threat to public health, according to the CDC, remains low. But what if that changes? How close are we really to the next pandemic? Before we get into this, I want to make a note that this video is not meant to scare you, make you nervous, or anything like that. Rather, its purpose is to inform you. While we will be diving into a potential pandemic scenario, I don't want to spook you at all, nor do I want to present this information in an irresponsible way. I'm not trying to fearmonger here. Okay, with that out of the way, let's begin to talk about H5N1. To really understand this thing, we need to know how we got to where we are today. Where was H5N1 first discovered? What is it? Does it differ from other diseases in any specific way? How far has it spread in the past few months? Just how worried should we really be? Let's find out. Alright, first question I'm sure you're all wondering, where did H5N1 come from? Well, the answer, as I've already mentioned, is birds. Avian influenza, more commonly known as bird flu, refers to the disease caused by infection with avian influenza type A viruses. According to the CDC, quote, these viruses naturally spread among wild aquatic birds worldwide and can infect domestic poultry and other bird and animal species. H5N1, the virus currently infecting loads of chickens, cows, and other animals in the United States and around the world, is a strand of bird flu that's become able to increasingly affect other animals besides birds, its initial hosts. H5N1 was first detected in southern China all the way back in 1997, when outbreaks among poultry populations there led to 18 human H5N1 cases and 6 deaths. Now I know what you're thinking, this can infect humans? Yes, but it's rare. Since its discovery, H5N1 has caused a confirmed 888 human infections as of March 25th, 2024. And the most worrying thing about those cases is that over 50% of those infected went on to die because of the virus, according to the CDC. Don't freak out too much about that number though. Like I said, human infections are rare as the virus has not evolved to be able to transmit from person to person effectively. Even now, with how much H5N1 has spread across farms, there's no evidence of person to person transmission. The reason why scientists are so concerned though is that when H5N1 has infected humans in the past, it has been extremely deadly. But anyways, let's get back to our timeline. We know H5N1 was discovered in 1997. So now let's fast forward to 2021. Everything I'm about to tell you is pulled from a New York Times article about this bird flu outbreak. It's a great article and it's linked down below along with the rest of my sources. In December 2021, H5N1 was detected on a farm in St. John's, Newfoundland and in a sick gull found nearby. Hundreds of birds on the farm died and the rest were culled to prevent the spread of the virus. This was the first detection of H5N1 in North America, and it's been hypothesized that migrating birds carried the virus here from other parts of the world. 1 month later, in January 2022, H5N1 made its first official appearance in the United States, in wild birds in both North and South Carolina. Here's where things start to get a bit more concerning in my opinion. In the summer of 2022, hundreds of seals began dying along the coast of Maine and the St. Lawrence estuary in Quebec, Canada. They had been killed by H5N1, and scientists say they may have been infected from eating or living near sick and dead birds. Now let's fast forward to fall 2022. At this point, the virus had been sweeping west across the United States via bird migration. By now, the virus had spread south into Mexico and Colombia. In November 2022, H5N1 reached Peru, where pelicans experienced a mass die-off as a result. It then continued down the coast, rounding the Horn of South America, and traveled up to Argentina and Uruguay, killing seals and sea lions in droves before reaching southern Brazil. That was as of late 2023. Before getting back to the current situation in the US, I want to highlight a quote from Dr. Marcella Uhart, who has studied elephant seals in Argentina for decades. When visiting beaches last October during what is supposed to be peak breeding season, Uhart saw what she described as, quote, an image from hell. Instead of seeing seals trying to find mates, it was, quote, carcass upon carcass upon carcass. H5N1 was massacring elephant seals. This virus's ability to infect mammals is very concerning, because that means it's one step closer to effectively transmitting between people. Here in the US, it has infiltrated dairy farms in numerous states and messed with milk production. While pasteurized milk is still totally safe to drink, and while we don't see cows dying en masse like we have with other animals, there's bound to be some crossover as the virus spends more and more time in the animals that humans interact with most on a daily basis. In fact, there already has been. Last month, the second ever human case of H5N1 in the United States was detected in a Texas dairy farmer. He had direct contact with infected cattle, meaning it's pretty much a guarantee that that's where he got it from. He also recovered completely, with his main symptom being pink-eye, despite this being a respiratory virus. Given the sheer amount of animals infected, I wouldn't be surprised if we see more human infections than those that work closely with infected animals. That doesn't mean H5N1 is going to start spreading from person to person, but it does give it more opportunities to learn to do so. So now let's get into the main question of today's video. Could H5N1 start a new pandemic? What might that look like? Let's dive into it. The only way H5N1 would be able to spread from person to person effectively is if it evolved to do so. It would need to evolve characteristics of other flu viruses that would allow it to spread more easily. How could it do that? The answer lies in pigs. Why pigs? Well, pigs are susceptible to infection by both avian influenza viruses and human influenza viruses. For a better explanation though, let's listen to a clip from a Real Clear Politics interview with Dr. Maurice Poteski, an epidemiologist and veterinarian from the University of California, Davis.
And I also worry just the geography of the United States, where we have our poultry overlaps with where we grow a lot of pigs. And pigs are this unique mixing vessel. So if you have a pig that, God forbid, is infected with a human influenza and an avian influenza, you have this potential for these recombination events to happen. And that's when you could roll, another snake eyes, and that new virus that comes out of there could be extremely virulent and extremely infectious.
So to summarize what Dr. Poteski just said, pigs are a very good body for viruses to mutate in, since those chunky boys can be infected by both avian influenza and human influenza. In this hypothetical scenario, let's say a pig gets infected by both of those, and H5N1 swaps genes with a human influenza virus, enabling person-to-person spread. Now, that process has been heavily simplified, as in I definitely skip stuff in terms of the science behind it, but that's an example of how H5N1 could mutate to spread from person to person. Anyways, given the sheer amount of animals currently infected with H5N1 in the United States, it's safe to assume that this mutated version of the virus could pop up somewhere in the country, or elsewhere in North America given the way it has spread so far. Maybe even South America, who knows, anywhere around here. So what happens now? Well, H5N1 is a respiratory virus, so we can assume it would start transmitting from person to person via respiratory droplets, aka the small bits of stuff that come out of you when you breathe, cough, sneeze, etc. Once it starts spreading from person to person, the biggest question would become just how infectious is the virus? Because if it's super infectious and super deadly, we've got a very massive problem on our hands. The good, and I say good in quotations here, thing about viruses is that they can't survive without a host, and they also want to replicate as much as possible. If a virus is killing its host too quickly, it can't replicate effectively, meaning less deadly versions of the disease will be what survive. As I previously mentioned, out of the 889 confirmed human cases of H5N1 since 1997, 463 of those have ended in death. That's an extremely high death rate for a virus, but it's also an extremely small sample size. Like I said, viruses want to survive, and they need a host to do that. So if H5N1 is killing its host too quickly, it won't be able to spread as effectively as something like COVID, which has a much lower death rate but is super infectious. Another thing to consider in this whole scenario, if human to human spread begins, we'll likely be able to vaccinate against it fairly quickly. We have flu vaccines for similar flu strains, which means we'd hopefully be able to get vaccine production going fast. And actually, quick update as of recording this, it's now possible that 2 bird flu vaccines could be available within weeks if needed. Both of the vaccine candidates are already in the US's stockpile, but they're there in limited quantity. Either way, if they work, that's very good news for fighting this virus. Even if it mutates, it won't mutate to the point where we have no clue what we're up against. Of course, there's also the question as to whether people would be willing to be vaccinated, specifically here in the United States. Whether or not people would be willing to do so would likely lie in how deadly this mutated H5N1 strand is. If it's as deadly as COVID, many people would probably opt to take their chances. If it's killing 20% of the people it infects, that may be a different story. Overall, it's really hard to imagine what an H5N1 pandemic would look like, and it's still very likely that we will never see one. On the very small chance that human-to-human spread of the virus began, government response would need to be swift. If not, we may be in much bigger trouble. But it would all depend on how infectious and how deadly this modified H5N1 strand would be, and that's basically impossible to predict as of now. Okay, that was so fun, wasn't it? How about we debrief, have a little snack, and calm down now? I think that's a good idea. Go grab a snack. I'm serious. Some goldfish? A granola bar? I like Nature Valley. Comment your favorite granola bar brand. Let's de-stress a little. Far more likely than not, H5N1 will never evolve to effectively transmit from person to person. While it can still infect people, it's not very good at doing so. Sure, it's deadly, but the odds of catching the virus are extremely low. Remember my point about viruses from a few minutes ago too. They want to survive and they can't do so without a host. As depressing as it is, viruses that kill a lot don't spread well. If H5N1 kills too fast, it won't spread effectively. And remember, we've got vaccines ready for something like this. And if those don't work, we can modify them so they're more effective. We're still a long way away from needing to do something like that though. Overall, a H5N1 pandemic will likely never happen. If spread between people does begin, we can slow the virus's spread before it gets to pandemic levels. Government response would need to be fast though before the genie is out of the bottle. Alright, that's all I've got for this hypothetical. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to like and subscribe. More videos coming soon. As I mentioned earlier, all of my sources for this video are linked down in the description below. Feel free to check them out if you're interested. I do all of this research myself, so if I missed something or left out a key piece of info, I apologize. I'm doing the best I can. Thank you so much for watching and for all your support. I really appreciate it. Hope I see you next time.